Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Eric from Tech. Similar to what I did with the ROG Phone 5 and the Nubia Redmagic 6 Pro, I'm going to be doing an Antutu benchmark stress test. So I'll test it first without the cooler and then run another setup test with the cooler attached. So let's get this Antutu benchmark started, guys. So before we start the test, I elevated the phone again so there is space at the bottom for the heat to dissipate from the back. So in this way as well, once I attach the Phone Cooler Pro, there should be space at the bottom. So before we start, let's do one more temperature test. Okay, 31.6. Let's start the test in 3, 2, 1. Alright guys, first test is done. That's actually the highest score I've ever seen on my BlackShark 4 Pro. It actually hit 839,743. And internal temperatures actually got to 42.4 degrees. And battery loss was at 7%. So let's test out the end temperature. 40.9 surface temperature at the end of the test. So let's go on to test number 2 in 3, 2, 1. Okay, second test is completed guys. The score is 828,074. Internal temps got as high as 49.3 degrees. And the end temperature or the surface temperature at the end of the test is 46. So it's getting pretty hot guys. Battery wise, it lost another 7%. So let's move on to the third test guys. Okay, so these are the results of my third test guys. Final score is 820,520. Internal temperatures got as high as 52.6, so it actually breached the 50 degrees Celsius mark. And as for the surface temperature, it's pretty toasty, 47.6 guys. And battery loss was at 8%. So let's start the fourth test. Okay, fourth test is done. Score is 808,872. Internal temperature reached the highest at 54.3 degrees. And let's measure the final surface temperature, 48.8. So let's go ahead and run the fifth and final test, guys. Alright, so the fifth and final test is done. Actually went down lower than 800,000 now. It hit a final score of 798,873. Temperature got to a really high 55.9 degrees Celsius and the battery went down by 7%. So let's check the final surface temperature, 49.8. Alright, so the first 5 tests without the cooler is done. It didn't do too bad. It actually managed to finish all the 5 tests, and looking at the scores, it didn't go down too bad, so I think it did pretty well. So I'll give the phone some time to cool down now, and then I'll run the same 5 tests, but this time I'll attach the BlackShark Fun Cooler Pro. So I'll be back in a couple of minutes, guys.
A few moments later.
Alright guys, so I'm back, and if you've noticed, I've already attached the BlackShark Fun Cooler Pro, so let me turn it on. There you go, and by default it is set to the frozen setting, so that means it's the fastest fan speed you can get on this cooler. Okay, so let's begin the test in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so the first test with the cooler is done. Score is 836,931. Internal temperature is 38.7 degrees and the battery went down by 6%. Now if we take the surface temperature, it's 34.9, so it's pretty cool with that cooler. So let's move on to test number 2. Okay, and the second run is done, guys. Score of 835,600. Temperature went up to 38.9. Still hasn't hit 40 degrees, guys, so that's a good sign. Battery went down by 7%. Let's check the surface temperature. 35.2, guys. So let's move on to our third test. Third test is done. Actually, this is the highest score I've seen for all the runs. So the BlackShark 4 Pro scores 840,087. Internal temperatures went up to 39.4, battery went down by 7%, and surface temperatures, it's a pretty cool 36.2. So let's move on to the fourth test.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go through the wastelands.
Alright, so the fourth test is done. Score of 831,513. Internal temperatures went up as high as 39.8. The surface temperature at the end of the test was a cool 35.8. And battery went down by 6%. Now let's do the fifth and final test, guys. Guys, so those are the results of my fifth and final test with the cooler, which is 838,409. Internal temperatures reached up to 39.3 degrees and the battery went down by 7%. So let's check the surface temperature, guys. 35.3, so that's pretty cool. So let's remove the cooler now, guys. And if I measure the temperature of the cooler, it's actually a pretty cold 10.7 degrees, so this thing gets really cold. So just to recap, guys, on the test without the cooler, the maximum surface temperature or external temperature that I got was 51.7 degrees. And the maximum internal temperature was 54.3 degrees. The highest score from the test without the cooler was of course the first one. It hit 839,743. While the test with the cooler, the maximum surface or external temperature was only 40.5 degrees Celsius. So that's a big improvement over the 51.7 that you're getting without the cooler. And the maximum internal temperature that I got with using the cooler was just 39.8 degrees. So it didn't even hit 40 degrees Celsius. And the highest score that I got from running the Antutu benchmark test with the cooler is 840,087. So if you notice, guys, there's not much of a difference between the 5 tests run with the cooler. So that means there is no performance throttling happening with this phone, especially when you're using the BlackShark Fun Cooler. So the Fun Cooler definitely makes a difference, but if you can't get your hands on one, this thing can still perform pretty well. Now if I get the percentage of the performance loss from the highest and the lowest score without using the cooler, it's only around 4.8%, so that's a pretty acceptable score. I ran this test 5 times, so the phone got really hot, but performance didn't suffer too much, so I can safely say that this phone can handle the heat. So that's it for my BlackShark 4 Pro Antutu stress test. Let me know what's the highest score you ever got on this phone, or if you have the ROG Phone 5 or the Redmagic 6 Pro, let me know what scores you're getting on those devices. So I'll end this video here, guys. As usual, a sub would be massively appreciated. Please like and subscribe, hit that bell icon notification, and see you all on my next one.